The last thing I remember clearly is the sound of the other car hitting mine. A sharp crack, like the world breaking in half. Then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was staring at a ceiling I didn't recognize. White tiles, fluorescent light, the smell of antiseptic and something warmer underneath it, like old coffee. A nurse was adjusting something near my wrist, and she smiled when she saw me blink. "There he is," she said. "Welcome back, Mr. Hartley." I tried to sit up. Bad idea. The pain came fast. Ribs, left shoulder, the back of my skull. She pressed her hand gently on my arm and told me to lie still. I'd been in a collision on the Trans-Canada, just outside Sault Ste. Marie. A pickup had run a red in the early morning ice. My truck was totaled. 3 ribs cracked. A concussion. Nothing fatal, she said. I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt 64 years old and alone in a hospital bed in Ontario, and I had no idea where my son was. His name is Cody. He's 36. He lives about 40 minutes from me, in a house I helped him buy, not entirely, but I put in $60,000 toward the down payment 6 years ago, because the market was moving fast, and he and his wife Diane said they couldn't wait. I didn't hesitate. That's the kind of father I was. That's the kind of father I always tried to be. I called him from the hospital phone because my cell had been destroyed in the crash. A nurse helped me dial. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message, kept it calm, told him where I was, what had happened, that I was okay but in the hospital and would appreciate a visit when he could make it. He called back 2 hours later. Not to ask how I was, to ask if my truck was covered under the insurance. "They tow it yet," he said. "Cody, I have 3 cracked ribs." "Yeah, I heard you on the message. That's rough, Dad. Did you call ICBC?" "I'm in Ontario. That's not, never mind. Are you coming?" There was a pause. I could hear Diane's voice in the background, low and flat. I couldn't make out words. "It's a bit of a drive," he said. "And Diane's got her thing this weekend. We'll try to come Sunday maybe. You should be fine by then, right? You said it wasn't that serious." I didn't answer right away. I lay there with 3 cracked ribs and the headache that felt like something was trying to get out through my eye socket, and I listened to my son breathe on the other end of the line. "Sure," I said. "Sunday." He didn't come Sunday. He didn't come Monday or Tuesday either. By Wednesday, I'd stopped expecting him. My nurse, a woman named Beverly, who had the kind of steady calm that can only come from decades of watching people at their worst, had noticed. She didn't say anything about it directly. She just started staying a few extra minutes when she came to check on me. Brought me a newspaper once. Filled my water without being asked. Small things. The kind of things family is supposed to do. "You have anyone coming today?" she asked Thursday morning. "My son's busy," I said. She nodded and didn't push it, but I saw something move across her face. Not pity exactly. Recognition. I've lived in the Algoma district my whole life. Born in Wawa, raised in the Sioux, spent 30 years running a small excavation and land clearing business. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest and it was mine, and I built it up from nothing with second-hand equipment and a reputation for showing up on time and doing what I said I'd do. When I retired 4 years ago, I had a paid-off house, some savings, a modest RRSP, and a business I'd sold to a younger crew for a fair price. My wife, Eleanor, passed away 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. It was fast and brutal, and the kind of thing that rewires everything in you. After she was gone, it was just me and Cody, and I threw myself into being there for him. Whatever he needed. I told myself that's what Eleanor would have wanted. I'm not sure that was right anymore. The loan started maybe 3 years after Eleanor died. Small things at first. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Car repairs, a credit card he'd let get away from him, a deposit on an apartment when he and Diane were between places. I always said yes. I never asked for interest. Half the time I didn't even ask for it back. The 60,000 for the house was different. That one I wrote down. Not in a legal way. Not with a lawyer or anything formal. Just a note I kept in my desk drawer. 60,000 lent to Cody and Diane, March 2019. No repayment schedule. I trusted him. Over the years, it added up to somewhere around $90,000. I'm not proud that I let it get that far. I kept telling myself it would even out, that he was still getting on his feet, that Eleanor would have done the same. But Eleanor was sharper than me about certain things. She would have said no at some point. She would have seen it sooner. By the 4th day in the hospital, I was doing better physically. The ribs hurt less if I moved carefully. The headaches were easing. Beverly said I'd probably be discharged by the weekend. She asked again if I had someone to drive me home. "I'll figure something out," I said. She gave me a look over her clipboard and said she'd help me find a medical transport service if I needed it. Small-town hospital kindness. I've never forgotten it. That evening, out of boredom more than anything, I asked Beverly if there was any way to access my email. The hospital had a small common room with a computer terminal. She walked me down there herself, moving slowly to match my pace. I wasn't expecting anything important. I figured I'd have a few forwarded notices from the utility company, maybe something from my accountant about the tax season coming up. But there was an email in my inbox from Cody, sent the day before, and he hadn't sent it to me on purpose. He'd meant to send it to Diane. He'd hit reply instead of forward. I read it once and didn't fully understand what I was looking at. I read it again. He was asking her to check whether I had updated my will after Eleanor died. He'd spoken to someone. He didn't name them but used the word consultant, which I took to mean a lawyer or a financial advisor, who told him that if I died without a will or with an outdated one, the default under Ontario succession law could complicate things. He wanted to know if Diane's cousin, who worked in estate law in Toronto, could look into it quietly. He also mentioned the house. He said that if I needed long-term care at some point, the house could be sold to cover it, and he wanted to make sure he was named as POA before that happened, so decisions didn't end up in the wrong hands. He wrote, near the end of the email, he's already had one health scare. These things have a way of compounding at his age. I sat in that common room for a long time. The fluorescent lights hummed. There was a vending machine in the corner that rattled every few minutes. Outside the window I could see the parking lot, and beyond it the tree line, dark and still in the November evening. I thought about the 60,000. I thought about all the smaller amounts, the ones I'd stopped keeping track of. I thought about Diane, who had always been polite to me in a way that felt like a performance, who had never once in 6 years asked me anything about Eleanor or about my life before Cody was old enough to remember. I thought about my house, a solid brick 2-story on a half-acre outside the Sioux that I'd owned for 22 years, that Eleanor and I had repainted 3 times, and where Cody had grown up and learned to drive and left for college without looking back. And I thought about something my old business partner Lawrence used to say. Lawrence and I had worked together for 15 years before he moved out to BC. He was the kind of man who said very few things, but when he said something, it was worth hearing. He once told me, "The time to fix a fence is before the calf gets out, not after." I hadn't fixed a fence, but I still could. I sent the email I'd composed in my head. Then I sat back and let the thoughts settle over me. Beverly drove me back to my room. I didn't say anything about what I'd found. I just thanked her and told her I'd slept well. "You seem different," she said. "I feel clearer," I said. "That's all." The next morning I called my accountant, a man named Sid who had been doing my books since I started the business and who I trusted completely. I told him what I'd found. He was quiet for a long moment. "You want to talk to someone in estate planning," he said. "I want to talk to someone today," I said. Sid had a contact at a firm in Sault Ste. Marie, a woman named Vivienne who specialized in exactly this. She agreed to a phone consultation that afternoon. By the time I was discharged, Saturday morning, I had a plan. The first call I made from my own phone when I got home was to Vivienne's office to confirm the appointment I'd booked for Monday. The second call was to Cody's number. He didn't pick up. I left him a message asking him to come by next weekend for a conversation about some family matters I wanted to sort out. I kept my voice even and ordinary. He called back within the hour. That was unusual. "What kind of family matters?" he said. "Just some things I want to put in order," I said. "Now that I've had a bit of a health scare, you know how it is." Another pause. Sure, Dad. Yeah, of course, we can do that. He showed up the following Saturday with Diane. She was dressed carefully, I noticed, more put together than she usually was for a visit to my house. She sat at my kitchen table with her hands folded and smiled at everything I said. Cody was attentive in a way he hadn't been in years. He brought coffee from Tim Hortons. He asked how my ribs were healing. He called me Dad more times in 1 hour than he had in the previous year. I let them settle. I offered them tea. We talked about small things. Then I told them I'd met with an estate planner and wanted them to know what I'd decided. The will had been updated. My house and remaining assets were going into a trust structure administered by Vivienne's firm in the event of my incapacity or death. The trust had a charitable component, a portion to the Salt Area Hospital Foundation in Eleanor's name, and the remainder would go to Cody, but structured as a series of disbursements over 10 years, not a lump sum. I watched Diane's expression change as I said that last part. Just slightly. Just enough. I also told them that I'd been reviewing my financial records from the past several years. The outstanding loans, the ones Cody and I had never formalized, totaled $87,000 by my count. I had two options in mind. One, I could forgive the debt entirely and simply remove that amount from his share of the estate. Or two, we could draw up a proper repayment agreement through a lawyer, small monthly amounts, no interest. Cody had gone quiet. He was looking at the table. I know this might not be what you expected, I said. And I want to say clearly that I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing this because I realized lying in that hospital that I hadn't taken care of my own affairs properly. That wasn't fair to either of us. Diane started to say something. I raised one hand gently. I also want to say that I love my son. That hasn't changed. But I'm not going to pretend that the last few years have been what I hoped for. I paused. Being in that accident, being in that bed for 5 days, it gave me time to think about what matters. And one of the things that matters is that when I'm gone, I want to have left things in order. Not left a mess for lawyers to sort out. Not left room for family to argue over what I would have wanted. I know what I want. I've put it in writing. And now you know too. Cody didn't say anything for a long time. Diane excused herself to use the washroom. I watched her go and I thought, she's going to call someone. Her cousin, the estate lawyer, probably. That was fine. There was nothing to undo now. When she came back, the energy in the room had shifted slightly. They stayed another 30 minutes. The conversation was careful and quiet. When they left, Cody hugged me at the door. A real hug, not the shoulder pat he'd been giving me for years. He held on for a moment. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner, he said. When you were in the hospital, I should have come. I looked at him. My son. 36 years old, starting to look a little like me around the eyes, which had always surprised me when I noticed it. You should have, I said, but you're here now. It wasn't a forgiveness and it wasn't a closure. It was just the truth, said plainly, which I found is usually the only thing worth saying. He nodded. I watched them back out of the driveway and I stood at the door until the car disappeared around the bend in the road. Then I went inside, put the kettle on, and sat down at Eleanor's old table by the kitchen window, the one she picked out at an estate sale in Wawa the first year we were married, with the small chip on one corner where Cody had run into it with his bike at age 7. And I let myself feel all of it. The anger that I hadn't let out in that room, the grief that was older than any of this, the strange, cold satisfaction of having finally fixed the fence. I didn't know if Cody would change. I'd be lying if I said I was confident he would. People don't transform just because the stakes become clear. But sometimes they surprise you. And either way, I'd done what I should have done years ago. I'd taken my life back into my own hands. Beverly called me 3 weeks later, just to check in. She said she did that sometimes with patients who'd been alone during their stay. I told her the ribs were healing and the headaches were mostly gone. And your family situation, she said, if you don't mind me asking. Complicated, I said, but manageable, which is more than I could have said a month ago. She laughed at that, and I did too. and for a moment the kitchen felt less quiet than it had since Eleanor. Some things you can't fix. Some fences have been down so long the car's been gone for years. But sometimes, if you're still standing and you've still got your wits and there's still a little time left, you can walk the property line again. You can see what's worth saving. That's what I chose to do. At 64, in a hospital in Northern Ontario with 3 cracked ribs and a phone call that accidentally told me everything I needed to know, I chose to stand up. I'm still standing. I keep coming back to that moment at the computer terminal, the fluorescent hum, the vending machine rattling in the corner, my ribs still aching every time I breathe too deep. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just filling time. And then there it was, sitting in my inbox like something that had been waiting for me to be still enough to find it. I don't think life sends warnings with labels on them. I think it just keeps putting the same door in front of you until you're finally ready to open it. I've been walking past that door for years. Every loan I didn't ask back for, every phone call Cody half answered, every Christmas dinner where the conversation stayed carefully on the surface. I felt something was off, but I kept telling myself I was imagining it. That's what love does sometimes. It makes you want to be wrong about what you're seeing. What I found in that email wasn't a surprise, not really. It was a confirmation. And there's a difference. A surprise knocks the wind out of you. A confirmation just settles something that was already sitting heavy in your chest. The thing I'm most grateful for, and I've thought about this a lot in the month since, is that I didn't react from anger. I wanted to. Sitting in that common room, I could feel it rising, that hot, sharp feeling of a man who's just understood how he's been seen. But I let it sit. I went back to my room, I slept on it. And by morning, I knew what I needed to do, and I knew how I wanted to do it. Not to wound, not to punish, but to be clear. Finally, after too many years of being unclear, there's something I've come to believe about the choices we make when we're hurt. The ones made from panic or rage almost always make things worse. The ones made from a kind of quiet, clear-eyed honesty. Those are the ones that hold. Vivian didn't just help me rewrite a legal document. She helped me say, out loud and in writing, what I actually valued and what I was actually willing to accept. That's harder than it sounds when you've spent decades being the person who just goes along. Cody is my son. That won't change. But being someone's parent doesn't mean absorbing whatever they hand you without limit. It doesn't mean funding choices they've never been held accountable for. It doesn't mean lying in a hospital bed alone, telling yourself he's just busy, he'll come, he probably just forgot. Eleanor never would have done that. She had a spine in situations like this. I used to think her directness was sometimes too much. I understand it now in a way I didn't when she was alive. What I learned, what I actually lived through in those 5 days in that hospital, is that clarity is an act of respect. Respect for yourself first, and then, maybe, for the other person too. Because you're finally treating them like someone who can handle the truth rather than someone who needs to be protected from your real thoughts. I'm 64. I still have time to do things right. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot.